What's up, everybody? Welcome to episode 28 of Godzillatober, Tokyo S.O.S. Tokyo S.O.S. from 2003 is the only film in the Millennium series that is a direct sequel, and it is a direct sequel to Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, continuing on the story of Kiryu, which is what they call Mechagodzilla in the Millennium series. Let's go.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching. I'm Jared Fearing.
I'm a lifelong Godzilla fan and a big fan of Halloween.
And nothing says Halloween like monster movies.
So this year, for the month of October,
we're going to review every single Godzilla movie, from Gojira all the way to Godzilla and Kong the New Empire.
So join me this month for a new video every single day and see if I go insane in the process. Let's get to it. This movie is a direct sequel, like I said. However, they immediately pivot from the story in the first one, which is all about the pilot Akane flying Kiryu. So that's kind of weird that they decide to completely kind of push her to the wayside, and then they introduce a mechanic on Kiryu who's kind of destined to pilot it. But it's just odd to me that they choose to have such a build-up with her character in the first movie and kind of leave it with a cliffhanger if they were just going to kind of push her to the sidelines. It's a bit of an odd choice, especially if these movies were filmed close together. I would love to know more about the production of the two. Once the movie gets going, though, it opens with a scene that, for the first time, kind of shows Mothra looking like she's good at flying. Very often when we see Mothra, it's either the kind of poor CGI-ish we see in GMK, or it's oftentimes the actual marionette Mothra, which looks really good, but it's such a big puppet, I guess. Well, Mothra's a puppet, I guess it's not really a suit, but it's usually so big that it moves quite slowly, and it's never really looked that good at flying. But they use a really good technique during the opening of this movie to really demonstrate that Mothra is actually good at flying. She passes by jets and stuff, and it's a cool way of introducing the character. This movie is quick to introduce the Cosmos, who are constantly in league with Mothra. Two little twins that show up, and they actually directly tie this movie to the original Mothra movie, which is very briefly mentioned in the previous film Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. It's interesting that they choose to include the original Mothra as part of the continuity, but it's actually like the main plot point of this movie, getting Mothra involved. There's kind of a theme in this movie about like the desecration of the dead, essentially, because the Cosmos are pissed that the Godzilla bones from the original Godzilla are being used as a skeleton within Kiryu. And they're like, hey, you gotta dump that body out at sea, and Mothra will keep everything cool. You just gotta trust us. And of course, the government is like, no, don't be ridiculous. We spent all our money on Kiryu. We're gonna use it. Signs start to appear that Godzilla is coming back and is probably going to attack again. This movie has a really odd scene that it's very hard to think that it's not a direct like dig at Gamera, but they find a very Gamera looking like turtle washed up on the beach, and it's got its neck clawed out by what they assume is Godzilla, and of course it was. A couple scenes later, there's a funny English-spoken scene with a nuclear sub that Godzilla pops up and destroys them, and there's a really hilarious line where one of the American actors is like, oh no, big heartbeats, and then the sub explodes and he's dead. So those are your last words, big heartbeats. Our main character, who I mentioned earlier, who is a mechanic on Kiryu, is kind of being bullied by like the class ace, and there's actually a really interesting scene in this movie where it's very similar to Top Gun Maverick. All the different pilots are like hanging out and talking about what they can do, and this guy that's kind of like the bully is playing like the Glenn Powell of the scene. and he's like shit-talking the mechanic and goes up to him and looks like he's gonna punch him in the face, but he stops like an inch in front and he opens up his hand, and it turns out he just grabbed a bug out of the air because he's just so badass and awesome. It really reminds me of that Top Gun Maverick scene, though. I might be wrong on the count of this, but I think the scene in this movie has 4 guys and 1 girl, and I think the scene in Top Gun Maverick also has like 4 guys and 1 girl, and they're all kind of being tough and talking about their flying accolades, and they even mention that one of the pilots is a Top Gun in this. So, you know, I'm sure they're not connected, or they're not related, or there's no inspiration or whatever, but it's very funny, and I'm going to choose to believe that Top Gun Maverick like was inspired by this scene. After another run-in with the class bully, the mechanic is brought in front of government officials, and they're having a chat about the situation. And the father of the bully is basically like, he was acting disgraceful, but I just have to let you know his only ambition was to become a pilot of the first giant robot. And you know what? Great ambition. Me too, buddy. If there were giant robots, suddenly I would want to be a pilot also. So I relate more to the bully than I do with the mechanic in this movie. That's kind of it story-wise. There's not a whole lot of plot details. It's just kind of building up to the final battle, which is pretty good once we get to it. This is also maybe the first movie that has 3 on-screen Mothras at one time. We get the 2 worm Mothras, and also it looks like they took a little bit of the ugliness away from the worm Mothras. I like them to be kind of gross, and they kind of like smoothed them out and dried them off or something. I don't know. They look a little bit less offensive, and I want my worm Mothras to be kind of gross, so I would like that to be a little bit better. But this movie also returns back to Fuzzy Mothra, and I really like the Fuzzy Mothra look. I think it's great. Unfortunately, Fuzzy Mothra gets immediately torched, and man, Mothra can't catch a break. Atomized in GMK and atomized in this. Kiryu starts going rogue again because it's really a Godzilla inside there, and the little worm Mothras are able to cocoon Godzilla during his rampage, and out of control Kiryu and the Mothras kind of work together, and they're able to cocoon Godzilla, and Kiryu flies Godzilla back out to sea, and the pilot is able to eject last minute. Kiryu and Godzilla fall into the ocean, presumably ending whatever's going on with Mothra, and the Mothra twins survive and head out back to sea. All is well. The movie ends with kind of an interesting cliffhanger. It suggests that they have the DNA of the 54 Godzilla, and the movie ends by saying like they're going to commence like a bioengineering thing that's going to duplicate the original Godzilla, something along those lines. And there's no sequel to this movie, so whatever that plotline is, I guess you're just kind of left thinking about what it might be, because this is obviously something they're not going to make a sequel to now. The action is good, and, you know, I like this movie. I don't know if I like it quite as much as Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. The story's a bit weaker, and, you know, I'm a little bit less interested by the time we get to the end of it, but I still had a lot of fun with this movie. I'm gonna recommend it, especially if you watch Godzilla against Mechagodzilla. It's a fine enough follow-up. It's just a little odd that they chose not to finish off the story that they kind of started in the first one. They kind of started fresh here, but their new fresh story is not as good. Still a fun movie. Definitely check it out. Very, very okay. I don't feel like it was amazing, but it's certainly not bad in any way. I hope you'll come back next time for the very last movie in the Millennium series. It seems like this has just flown by, but we're talking about Final Wars, and this is a very interesting film indeed. There's a lot of things that I have to say about this. I'm interested to rewatch it and bring my thoughts to you guys. I have a lot to say about it even now. It's been a few years since I've seen it, but Yeah, I'm interested to rewatch it. So come back tomorrow for Final Wars. We're in the home stretch. Once we get past Final Wars, there isn't much left. We're into the modern era. So come back tomorrow. And as always, like, subscribe, comment. I appreciate it so much. Thank you so much for helping the channel out and helping me grow. And I will see you all tomorrow.